comes to you only at certain times where you feel most of the life is an organized life of survival and continuity. The dream is to have a job or something. So one is organized into a literal way of living depending on what their social schema is. And if they're born into an existing framework, they inherit religion, they inherit a history. And so once the history is driven to continue. But then there are people who have been interrupted or somehow are reflective in their life, like at Einstein, like certain philosophers, where it's a reflective life. And in reflective life, it's not literalized. So then you find many jobs that are not jobs, that are not really work like that, but are jobs that are teaching, jobs that are other things, where you start to see certain like work aligning with the person's interests. And therefore you see work that comes out of need, which is a kind of slavery, where you have to do it. But there are then jobs that came out of more of a creative urge, which were not literal. And that allowed a kind of parallel life to be integrated, where working was not slavery, but working was a creative act. Now, the more people then started to have that, then work did not literalize for the artist. For those people who were not organized into the literal world, there were then peripheral worlds that explored who am I, what are we, and they were the basis of the religious orders, that questioning. But the religion wasn't questioning that much, it was dealing with the masses and defining what they should do and how they should live. But there was always a contingent that was religious but were not organized by the religion and explored what is this like. And so those who explored, and usually one had to be interrupted to explore deeply, you saw parallel lives being lived. And depending on what kind of, we'll say if in fact you had an acting career, you had a creative career, the thing that stymied you, the question that stymied you would cause a reflection creatively. But you couldn't reach that unless you were in that state. So then as people had creative lives, they started to see creative dimensions in it. And that somehow you had to genuinely approach it. It didn't have the literal world's elements to it of making a buck, surviving, hustling. It came from a different place. At the same time, it lived in a parallel place where the literal world dictated how one should act. Hidden to it was another world that was carrying on, that was based more on a genuineness. Now, if you scientifically approach it, you saw dimensions. If you artistically approached it, you saw dimensions in it, and that you were trying to communicate those dimensions. So I was looking at some of my father's photos of some of my father's old paintings. You see, it was about communicating something. And then I was reading about early Yoko Ono and how she would just go on stage and create a thing, put a piece of paper on the wall, throw a piece of fruit at it or something like that. But just going back to Cage's non-music becoming music, and somehow that you didn't see the separation. You saw breathing and non-breathing and holding your breath in, and you saw variations on breathing. Anytime you explored anything, you saw variations on it that the general public just heard about it later on, but those who explored it discovered hidden dimensions in plain sight. So now we have people who touch each other. They let's say you're touched by an old Mahler. I don't know if you've heard Mahler before. Mm-hmm. And you see somehow in the music a distraughtness. You see a dialogue and a conversation happening. And then those you saw in early bebop music with Charlie Parker or whatever, They were all using drugs, and everyone knew their problems in the music. And they can tell in the music where it was at, where they were feeling, how they were feeling, what they were expressing, without knowing music, without knowing literally how to read music. Their music wasn't coming out of the literalized read music. It was coming out of accident, failure, form. It was an exploration that didn't use the literal world of success for it, but also saw all dimensions of the experience. And failure somehow was a soul-searching element in the literal story.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, why? And they say, because somehow when you entered the life soulfully, there was a kind of selling out when you had to get a literal job or something like that, and where normal people would be happy. Somehow you couldn't sell out. The job had to speak to you, or you had to have a friend in it, or something had to be human in it. Hmm?
Mm-hmm.
And I see I go back then to a memory that my mother then told me a story years later that I found out about, that when she worked in a sweatshop as a sewing machines in line, like you pass the clothes on at 16. And the pressers were guys, they're Italian guys. She ran off with an Italian presser there at 16. And she became Catholic, married. Her family then said goodbye to her, and she ran off with this guy and had my brother. Then I had knew nothing of this kind of story. I was always confused. He died young of tuberculosis, but then the story runs through and was running through the life, and it was natural, and then you discover what happened, and everyone in the neighborhood knew what happened, that he died, and then her father took her back into the family, and they found my father, probably a guy who needed a green card or something. And then you go back 600 years and you say they were doing that all the time in Europe, and people were dying, they were crossing religions, kids fell in love. Um, and yet I knew nothing of that story growing up. And everyone knew that story but me. So let's say you live in a situation where you discover who you are because you don't know who you think you are, this other character, just a kid growing up in a situation with friends. And then you discover that there's a whole network of experiences and who is what. Hmm?
Mm-hmm.
And in the discovery, it shifts the plane. There's an aha in it. And in the aha moment, you see an element of the happening that was hidden in plain sight. And anytime you see the mystery hidden in a history, and you see it deeply, you've entered into the world somewhat from the mystery as the fact of your life. So if I see the mystery is there in applied physics, and it's to have that sense that there's a mathematical element that's also happening, which will also happen with any kind of learning or understanding or background or whatever, that there's another dialogue running through the story. Hmm?
Mm-hmm.
Once you perceive these dimensions, they become second nature to you now. So then I would say, as you make discoveries, you would then see simultaneously a connection to something you remembered or something you read or something that a famous person once said. Hmm? But now it illuminates. So I think there is a dialogue that is happening in that way, where one has reference to philosophical breakthroughs, to understanding. I was reading the book of Paul, who is translated first into from Judaism into Christianity, and reviewing Jesus's life, and didn't see a break or anything. Saw the normalcy of it continuing and deepening, but at the same time, you saw invested interest creating this and that and their own background. So then you see the organized religion has a motive. And when you see, why did these two people fight, as I mentioned last week there? And I say, I've been exploring remorse, and they held on to the issue no matter what. But then each of them was worried if the other was hurt or if they were okay. So somehow the issue was forgotten, but the relentlessness of it seemed to be purposely to bring on a remorse. And when I say remorse, I'm talking remorse not from one overwhelmed by it, but one having access. Like when one experiences remorse, it's usually a genuine one. And as you experience or explore the remorse, it gives you a sort of insight into a happening that was hidden in plain sight. That the story is not the story in that way. The literalization. Okay. And you saw that people generally, no matter how much they're advised, whatever the circumstance, create remorse. And it seems that remorse becomes, to some degree, the motive. Remorse becomes your access to history as to what happened or something. You see remorse being created in the world as a constant, where any human looks at it, anyone affected by it, and they're helpless in the fact of it. But then as you see from the perspective of the creative perspective, where it sends you into a place where the doer doesn't own it, because remorse in the literal story allowed you to do something about it, but remorse from this other state is seeing it from the writer's perspective or the creator's perspective. And you see the relentlessness of the action, even though it was obvious to anyone looking at it, but the relentlessness of the action was to bring about a certain state. And the issue hid it. Now, if the issue was PTSD, as I mentioned earlier on, remorse, then there's a kind of moral remorse that takes place where you may have gone past your inner workings, where something you were legally allowed to do it, they cheered you on, but still the experience of it lived on. And so in some cases, because of so-called PTSD, you were treated. But in also other cases, you saw that PTSD was actually protecting something, not a flaw to be gotten rid of. That a person had experienced a profundity, and the reaction that was happening in their body and their being was not a flaw. They may have had to clear up something. The flaw was singing songs to make you do it. The flaw wasn't, you understand, the reaction to it in your body. The song was believing the story that allowed you to suppress something in yourself. And it's discovered years later. So the flaw was that somehow the structure allowed you to suppress your humanity, to believe that killing was normal. And when you did come into killing, you even thought it was normal then, they may even reward it, but you went home and it wasn't normal. And so that trying to balance that normality while something profound is happening, and then making the profound as if it's a flaw, because to continue going is and they say, hold it, something has interrupted the life, the continuity of life, to an examination of the life. And yet the examination of the life is treated as if it's a burden or a problem to be solved. And to some degree, if it's reactive to the degree that it did something. So there is to some degree, a caring for it, but not denying the depth of its experience. Because the depth of the experience then sees the place from a different place. And you re-enter the story and you cannot be organized literally into the world that way again. Your relationship then is with the connection to the creative world, then is through a feeling. And so then when one comes back into the world where they've lost feeling in order, they did something that interrupted them, And so the juggling act that one may have in the future after there's this idea of feeling is bad because it brings on the experience again. And no matter how much you rah-rah the experience and give it this or that, it still sends one somehow. Yet, from my perspective, it's not only a troubling circumstance, but it's not a flaw. There's a deep communication happening. And that deep communication ends the slavery of the literal world. There's something genuine then that you come from. Then you see the love of America is in fact more around its beauty and its depth, not a literalization that you're forced into roles and stories like that. So then you start to see a life more related to the poetry that runs through the existence. Because that's what it was. That's what it was if you joined the Navy. So it was a movie. It was the poetry. The literalization of it was so stupid. It destroyed all the poetry, and all the poetry was a violation. And so you see the literalization of the person is actually a loss of their connection to the human. And then the literal sense becomes the person. And when the literal becomes the person, then they have a history, a phone number, a name, a past, literally. But as I mentioned before, if you read your mother's diary after she passes, you see she was a woman. You see your past is also a mystery while it's a history. That so much was hidden in plain sight. And it's made to look like a conspiracy theory. And as it literalizes like that, it does conspire. But basically, when one is entering creatively from that perspective, you see that there are many levels to the life being lived. You see not only the movie, but you see the movie of your own life. Not only the real-time situation, but you see how almost everyone worked to have an experience in the future, a memory. And that somehow you access relationships that were once literal, almost impossible in present, are experience in absence. That somehow an accidental feeling shows you parallel lives being lived. And some kind of conversation carrying on, which is not literal conversation, but as if you were taking a walk with the person. And so in the normalcy of the walk, allow the normalcy of sometimes conversation or just hanging out, but somehow the normalcy of hanging out becomes the normalcy of memory, where it's what one would be resistant to expose in the world is immediately the nature of the relationship, a feeling shared. And you discover past lives where it was a feeling shared and where the feeling was lost, and it literalizes. And when it literalizes, the history then becomes the predominant factor. So one visits their life and sees the ins and outs of it, the structures of it. As I'm exploring elements that come to me, the exploration of, as I said last week, remorse, how relentlessly the people worked at it, and how relentlessly, if you even get the news for a moment out there, they seem to be working at sorrow relentlessly. As if the lives are separate, as if they don't echo through. So, how you doing? Have you seen Urja?
Yeah, I had the trouble to get in. They added
That's her.
a step to push a button, and I could not. I went around and around. Finally, I'm very proud. I pushed the button and it worked. Huh. But it's the first time it happens.
Okay, I'll see you later.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why.
Oh, I
Is
forgot
anyone-
to say hi to
Well, no, now it's always going to be the missing button, isn't it? And yet someone may come in and just touch the button and there it is. And yet you have to figure out. I was seeing that on trying to watch a show, I think on Amazon or something, and it wouldn't come on. And it said, you're not connected to this and you're not connected to that. And you're supposed to find,
Yes.
You're looking all around, touching every button. And then after you give up, it comes on. And then it says, yeah. So there's none of the
Yeah.
logical ones, okay.
I was giving up. Yeah.
So it's interesting to,
Yeah.
but also to kind of purposely not know in some sense. It's not, you know what I mean? It's not only not knowing, but it is a kind of not wanting to know in that way.
There must be some of that, yeah.
That somehow you have signs of what's happening.
Yeah.
Not some, I'm not only talking about coughing or falling down, I'm talking about signs of what is happening is how your kind of lack of interest is also there. Like the complexity, like we'll say, guy kidding around, should you get the teeth? And it'll take a year to get the teeth and you're this old and okay. And so it's a real question. It's not like you just have teeth or something like that, as you imagine. But then when you see if you're getting them, you really have to go through a process of flying around and okay. So in kidding around, and Janet made a go of it because her daughter lived there. She was able to get a break together and visit and hang out and do, but it did require you. So it just wasn't there like that. And I guess most of these things that they're doing now, they just don't replace it that day or something. But it's very weird. As they are seeing almost, they can create now imagery and they can replace and operate and do all these things that folks want. So we're in an interesting phase of life of shifting and what looks like complexities is complexities to us because we're not learning the essence of it. Those who kind of who are born in it, who are born with the computer and know it instantly, it's automatic way, just like writing would be for you.
Right.
Or yeah. So in that sense, you see the shifting. But you also see that you have created a world for yourself using the technology to suit yourself.
Yes.
Okay. So then many people are doing that on a really spaceship level, not only to find a show or this or that or a circumstance or connection, but they're doing
Anything.
it. Well, I mean, once you have a background in something, then you can bring that, then you can see dimensions in the technology available to you. The concern, as it was the concern they supposedly had with artificial intelligence, and what they were claiming a couple of weeks ago is that one fellow says that he has come up with artificial intelligence that has feeling, human feeling, and can detect human feeling. Now, some companies are stopping the artificial intelligence, their face reading skills. They're finding out that they're usually wrong in their face reading skills. Well, a high percentage of wrong face reading skills is like the electric cars. Still, they are kind of going by themselves and stuff like that when they want to go. And I also imagine if I had an electric car, it would argue with me and say, I'd say, no, I want to go downtown. It says, no, let's go to Taos and have a good time. So I start to feel that what they're talking about, an electric car that knows what you want, starts to have issues with where you're going. Okay.
I saw last night online, in the future, there's going to be an app on your phone. When you go out with your dog, you can film your dog and the app will tell you what he's feeling. It's translating the language of the dog. They're working on it.
Well, they have those buttons now where animals can actually talk. Have you seen those?
No.
They have like 50, some of them have like 50 different buttons and they have words they can form sentences.
What do you think the animals are saying to each other about people? Now, so my feeling is that the animals that they're making talking are speaking in English kind of language or human, kind of like it's human, that they have human thoughts.
Yeah.
But then when I'm looking at him out there, Shorty,
Yeah.
got weird thoughts going on. Okay. So let's say they may have a language of their own that they're viewing us with.
Yeah.
And they may say, oh, she's calling you again. Come on, I don't want to go now. Okay. So let's say it is the kind of vibe language, isn't it? Just like you're vibing with the young child before language is there. You're vibing what the child is feeling and thinking.
More and more, I feel the dog, like Katie, the girl,
Yeah.
the girlfriend of Alex. She came with her dog, and she
Yeah.
just came back from Italy, and I could really feel that it was such a good dog. It was a very good dog. You know, like I can't explain. Some dogs are simpaticos, and some are
You
not.
mean the dog knew her hurt?
Yes,
The dog was simpatico to her deep hurt. So it wasn't a regular dog that did all this other stuff, but it did.
right.
It hugged her a lot, or needed her a lot, or jumped in her lap a lot. Or,
Yeah.
well, it may be without it. Now you could explain that scientifically. You can explain that creatively, but you understand that they have created their thing together.
Yes.
Okay. So then you understand that coming to you has a similar element to it.
And she just came back from Italy, so her dog is living in America.
So if she's visiting you, you should have her sit in your lap with the dog in her lap.
Right.
And you just lap for a couple of hours, a couple of laps maybe. But
Lapping it
I'm
up.
saying, no, the lap would be intimacy. You know what I mean? If you have a child in your lap, a dog in your lap, there's a naturalness to it, where the body just naturally surrenders, and even if the child was about to fall, the body would shift and try to catch it and so on. So remarkableness is happening in the normalcy.
Yes.
But again, like Derek asked, but if one explores the normalcy, then you start to see what we are calling normal, our everyday, has dimensions happening to it simultaneously. And they look like it's happening in time in the future, as what time is called the future for us. But you see the dimensions of the time that are happening that you access. So let's see you meet your past not as your past, but as your present. But somehow the meeting in the present had to be genuine, not coming from the possessive of the story. And you understand to some degree, if you are to access the magic of your life, then the hurt that one felt was a medium of communication, somehow in absence. Is that hard? I'm saying that somehow there's an absent conversation that was not based on the literalness of the story, but a conversation you never had literally because you happened to have the role you had. So let's say in The Girlfriend, you are having a conversation with your boy that you couldn't have had as a literal mom, but you could have as a girlfriend. Really, really simple as a girlfriend to have that conversation that the mommy's trying to have. Okay. So they say, why? I say, because what looks like a simple dopey thing is in fact deeply spiritual if it happened.
Yeah.
So it happens in a kind of absence where the story, the literal aspect of the story has allowed something to happen, has allowed someone for her in her life that has a kind of there-ness for her, you, where it's not literalized, where it's moving in or not moving in. And it was also brought up to you. You okay with it? So the simple attraction and affection shared as if it was normal. It's because normal on another level. It's not normal on the literal world. It can explain away psychologically. But basically, it seems to be a pure thing. Instantly, there's a feeling for you where it's at home. And instantly, you feel it's adorable and you love to hang with it. Now, everyone else in town may run away from such a scene. And I say, why? Because there's an implicit promise of care in it. So at the same time, it has a simplicity. You see that dying had to happen for it to happen. This had to happen. It had to, for it to be a soulful experience in normalcy, it had to genuinely be a soulful experience that then is social. Here, when I can stay over, yeah, we can do this, we'll go shop. In order to literally socialize, it had to somehow be genuine. And the genuineness even dispels the need for a history of shared, where there's an instant shared moment. It's normal, but somehow the genuineness of it has given a dimension to each of you. Where you see that the conversation is not literal, it's related to the form and the body. There's conversation in absence. That relationship is not only a possessive in the literal world, but when it's released from the possessive, meaning that it has a name and a history and a form, when it's released from the possessor, the literal child becomes more the love affair that you had. And a kind of element floating over the love affair. So it's very weird because the literalization to me is what was weird, when it obviously is existing on so many levels. And something has to be true before one reaches it. And true is not, again, like a police idea of truth. It has a different kind of truth that goes with a creative life, where you see where it's sold out literally to make a buck or this or that, or to survive, or the person made you do it in order to survive. So then you see the artwork, and then you see where it translates into the literal world. And so you see that dialogue is happening on in one's life creatively between the literal survival and the evocative survival, which is not the literalness of it, but a journey. The codification of the journey is not literalized, it's more reflective. And so I feel that, and each of us to some degree has made an expression of that feeling. So I feel that you're doing that, and folks are coming into your life around a similar circumstance.
Yes.
So let's say if it was literally there, they would have yelled at you. Now, somehow, when it comes to it's not yelling at you. You know, let's say my son, if it was literal, they would start fighting. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Okay. But then basically in a dream, it's a conversation that, okay, that's from a different place. And I say, is it wishful thinking? And I say, wishful thinking employed by the creative act, not escaping a circumstance. And I say, well, how is it differently? I say, when in fact you are exploring what happened, it's not the literalness of what you're exploring dimensions of something that you bring an interest to it. That interest allows you to some degree access. The genuineness of your interest allows you an exploration of a parallel dimension. I feel that is this too whacked out, or can we flow with it? What
It's wonderful.
That somehow the literal existence is dependent on a literal world of doing. But the evocative existence, doing is only a part of it, not the owner of the story, because doing squelches too much of the story towards survival. Okay. So somehow, when one no longer has background behind them, but something has interrupted them, and then they have to go into the world in this circumstance as they are. So in my meeting you, I met you in Woodstock, you had to then go into a circumstance as you, after the Rajneesh thing, then you went to Woodstock, and you had to recreate yourself and create yourself through friendship or circumstance or whatever, and explore these other things that normalized. Everyone that we've met had some aspect of that situation. Somehow their literal lives were interrupted, and somehow they met, and in meeting they shared a moment, but it was lives in flux. And then work became not literally a job work, it became something, a creative expression more. Or as what they say with Shakti, when she created Ganesh, she took the perspiration from her body and the perfume and squeezed it and created the baby. So it was, Ganesh supposedly was a baby created without male. And the other son was the seven-headed son, was created only by male. So, but the whole idea that the Ganesh was actually the female aspect of existence, and that the male could not understand. It was based because Shiva would just walk into the bathhouse while the women were washing, and everyone felt it was a violation or something. So they created this baby Ganesh to guard the door. You know. Okay. So that's the story, but it was without male. It's just the perspiration and the perfume I read in one story. That was the creation of Ganesh, the boy, and but supposedly the female aspect, the kind of seeing the world from that perspective.
Yeah.
What do you say? Spiro says yes. He likes that. Spiro is exploring, well, esoteric India. It would seem, that's my perspective, to some, not the full screen, but he seems to be genuinely exploring the elements behind the structure, the origins of it, you know, and see if in fact you know the lingo and the circumstance where you had the experience.
Did you see there is a on Netflix, I think it's about how to introduce spirituality to a very high athlete. Like there was a basketball player, he's always mad, and he wants to work on that. And Deepak Chopra put him in a meditation, and he seemed to be taking it like water. You know, it was interesting to watch that.
Yeah.
I like the idea to give them a portal to something that they're ready to explore, maybe, because it's so raw what they do. You know, they want to win. He wants to win so bad that he gets really angry when he can't win. And every time he gets on there,
Yes, but then let's say you need help, right? Deepak Chopra then helps you. And the population of that now he was also a brain surgeon, wasn't he? I think. Wasn't he a neurosurgeon before, studying in America? There was a bunch of Indian candidates that came to America at one point, and they were neurosurgeons and neurologists, many of them. And many of them became gurus afterwards. And that we met later on, and that they were actually brain surgeons also, but then became better known as then translating that into the culture that was now happening, or they were creating also. But again, okay, so then it becomes a thing naturally, but then you also see a whole industry that comes out of it. And again, it becomes possessed by.
Yeah. But the first impulse for me was it was so delightful to see this
But
big guy becoming so tender.
The dialogue, though, where it varies, I think there is something true to explore, but then the dialogue is what you're told to explore, then becomes how to be special.
Yeah.
Not how to wake up, not how to see, but then how to. So I see that it enters into the world, the literalness enters into the world again of how to make a buck. And they ain't talking small buck, they're talking, okay. And so then the premise of it is a declaration of yourself as an actual human being, and you deserve this and you deserve that. All of those things I feel are relatively so, but as it becomes politicized, it becomes literalized. And so then I walk through the neighborhoods. I see there is a beauty that, just like the religion, once the feeling becomes a religion, and you see that there's a motive to the religion that's not there with the religious, then you see the religious person walking through, or the kind of pure person walking through it. At one point, we'll start to say, holy man, you made $1.5 billion last year. Or, I'm not in that world at all. You understand? So you see that somehow there's a literal thing going on that's kind of true, not, I can't say bad or good. It's like walking down Wall Street. You see, and that's the literal nature of it once it literalizes. But evocatively, it had a sense to it of a parallel life. But the declarative life that I am this and I am that, to me, is not the discovery life. The discovery of that entity in yourself, the discovery of your history won't kill. The literalization of your history will fight for it against the other country. So you understand, but the schmuck in us will not allow us to literalize that way where it's vulgar or violent. And part of the violence is to make a buck on such a scale that the world is starving. That this and that, and so then you're talking about elements that are real and flow through the system that you discover. But as it literalizes, it then becomes a literal church again. And then you find yourself selling. I can't say wrong or right. I'm just saying, for me, there is a purity in relationship to the thing. And somehow, again, like I mentioned as a kid, if you were in the army or something, you may have the movie experience of it. But when you started to see the anti-human elements where they sang songs and made you strong about it and lift weights and do all that, so you would do things that were considered anti-human but normal in that situation, you see that there was a reaction that would resound through your being, through your body, throughout your life. When something was violated without you even knowing it, that it even existed. So let's say there's something in the make-a-buck world that has a normalcy to it, but then there's sometimes when you come to a point where you say, hey man, they've co-opted the energy and they're making it into a business or a structure. So as a byproduct of being in that space, the doer is not so important. So the ego doesn't have to be pushed up or made up into anything. The perception does that to some degree. Again, I see elements just like you see in the religion that are so, that feelings you may have that are there. But I feel as it is literalized into a system, and the system starts to prevail. And the system usually then becomes, making a buck is a measure in the world of where you are. So it then becomes make-a-buck systems that run out there that start to define the term. For me, that's your call. Everyone has their own creative sensation of where they're at with something and managing the energy. So when it literalizes, means that you actually have to sign a paper saying this or that. Okay, it's neither bad nor good. But basically, it's so I see that when they are talking a huge population, they are talking about really learning. I was reading an article on remember that, what was his name? Robbins. He used to walk on coals as part of the
Yeah.
ceremony. Do you remember that guy? So there was a big article about how many
Tony
people.
Robbins?
Yeah,
Yes.
Tony Robbins. But he didn't introduce it. Apparently, it was 1,000-year-old Greek ceremony or something also, and a ceremony around there. And there is a way on walking them that Robbins did introduce now, but now that becomes a lot of corporate structures introduce that to the new workers and everything that, so that you have strength and, okay. But then a lot of them are getting injured. They say you have to walk in a way. Yeah. So some got 3rd-degree burns, they said, because they also have conferences where they have that.
Yes, I've heard that a lot of people are doing that in their workshops and things.
But it was to give you confidence, But the premise was, but they say, no, what happens is the coals get caught between your toes, then you really get burned.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, so you had to walk very quickly and flat-footed or whatever. So then we were like, okay. I remember all the meditations that I had to do and this kind of crazy stuff. But it wasn't crazy. It was normal at the time. Tony Robbins, saw as kind of lame at the time because it was upscale. It was kind of trying to teach people how to be business people and to be strong in doing this or doing that. When we thought that we came more from a hipper scene, more creative scene than a feel-good situation, But they were all around. All of these approaches were around everywhere that you were with. Oh, did you want to say something with Chopra? I don't know literally what Chopra is doing out there now. Every now and then I run past, but
He has a new look also. It's
Yes,
a very
yeah.
expensive new look.
Did you help him with that look, Spiro? No, you had nothing to do with that.
Hung out, but mostly by way of a friend of mine that's close to him.
A friend that's close. It's a remarkable world, isn't it?
Yeah, he's all right-ish. He's charming.
I'm sure.
He's mostly charming.
In fact, he should visit Urja for a week and hang out with him.
Yeah, he doesn't put money down or anything, but occasionally he'll put on his name and say, "You could use my name."
No, he helps a lot of people. You said that the
He helped
Beverly
Eddie.
Hills
He helped
guru.
Ram Puri.
Puri. So basically, and
And,
that whole world is existing out there. Huh?
Yeah. Tony Robbins makes $1 million a day ish or some crazy thing with Paul Tudor Jones. Sonia, his wife, was the money behind a lot of the Ashtanga world.
How come you haven't come out with any of these billions then?
I guess I have.
You come into.
My fingers are like a sieve.
So what do you say? Oh, Chopra, what are you doing there, Robbins? Come on, Robbins, get off of there. Get off of the couch, will you? So the normalcy of it. So let's say we have the normalcy of it. You're inviting me to go up to a retreat with Stephen up there in Boulder, the normalcy of it. And then, in fact, I may, and then in doing that, why would I be invited except to shed some light on a situation that inherently is resisted in the continuum? So now why would I meet your friend, Chopra, and I say, hold it, man, bro. Okay. They faked you into the story, man. They faked you into Chopraism. That's their nature.
I've gone to a couple Chopra things.
So Chopra then has a wake-up call where he meets maybe Spiro by accident.
I taught his daughter yoga.
He sneakily taught his daughter yoga, he said. So he's sneakily trying to have a conversation when he said, yo, bro. Now it's feeding the status quo. You've organized an experience that has to be genuine into a kind of, as if it's something wrong with the mind and it has to be cured. And so my feeling is, I think, no, it's a sense of seeing what is actually happening. So we then had that the other day when we were discussing where your son may be sick, maybe having PTSD or something like that, but it was all, and you're afraid for them, but you can't enter there, but they're adult people making their own decision. So then you see the helplessness and you experience yourself, the helplessness that you felt.
Yeah.
You couldn't just run into the story and grab the kid by the head. It was a man, not a kid. Okay. But it was also not a possessive. And so it wasn't only your son, it was a person in the world who happened to be your son, and you experienced that. But you also experienced that it's you. So then you see your helplessness, not helplessness like you're that, but you understand that you cannot, you're being faked out into running into the story. Somehow you're feeling it deeply, sends its own message. The relationship is not to the literal son. The relationship is in a different way, when in fact there's a helplessness because you cannot literally run into the story and order it around. Unless there is a happening in such a way that there's no separation between you. It's like saving the person. Like if they're in a fire, then there's no problem of jumping in and saving. But to literalize the story, somehow it's where it's sending you. And when it sends you to a deep enough place where there's not the doer that owns the story, then I feel that there's a kind of transmission on a different level. And it's not based on surety. It's not, it's as weird as a song coming to your head out of nowhere.
Absolutely. Yes.
You understand? And literally it is a song coming to your head out of nowhere.
Yes.
Because there's nowhere in the literal sense, but there is nowhere in the unit. There is no place called nowhere in the universe. In fact, Earth is nowhere in the universe. But we consider the universe to be nowhere out there. The
Right.
Earth is. So when you start to visit dimensions that are parallel to you, now they may have been elements that you've had that affect your relationship to the social order and the literalness of it. But then you also discover that the normalcy is not only the literal world, but there are that you have inherent normalcies in you that if you run into situations, they come out. As I was kidding around the other day, I discovered throwing the ball in the air, playing baseball and handball. All those balls came back to me immediately. Throwing the ball in the air, bouncing it off the wall. I can even close my eyes and catch it left-handed. All of a sudden, what was inherently in the body that we had as kids came to me and playing like that. Okay. And as its own exercise. Yeah. And even my eyesight, everything in that time, as I explained, that part of, you see that that what looks like past experience is also presently, inherently in the form and is awakened. So what looks like literal past is also inherently present in my mind's eye. And somehow the memory of it, a certain kind of special memories of it, bring a conversation. Like Mary just walked in and sat down.
Hello, Mary.
Is anyone else on? Well, we don't know. We have to ask Kai.
There is
hi.
Will.
Okay. What's that sound? Any other questions happening? Will, how are you doing?
I'm good. I just got back from work. I've been working like almost 80-hour weeks. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's just sort of nonstop, but it's very temporary. Probably just a couple weeks like this. So I'm doing it while I've got it.
I was reading a bit about the Yoko Ono. And to everyone, it looked like she was captured then by John Lennon and defined by it. But then there was a story about the Yoko Ono that, came into the world, did her thing, rented an apartment, broke. She used to put on plays in the apartment, invite the neighborhood to do shows where there was only crates that she had in it, and she was on the ball. So it was pretty nice. And how she was related to cage kind of music or effect where anything you did had a message in it. Hmm?
Mhm.
And with her, to her premise, her life became art.
Mhm.
Hmm? And so then the things had different meanings in it. The everyday things had different meanings in it. So they said even when they got a job, they kind of expanded upon it by creating a theater of it, where you had known personas who do certain things in the job and come on there. And so you saw the opera experience that you were in at the same time as literally a job. Are you working with other people?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then it becomes a team.
Mhm.
And then you have times and situations. So it's remarkable. Hmm?
Yeah.
And okay, and then I meet a team. Team players
Mhm.
who are consciously employed as team players. And so let's say the remarkableness of it is this crazy quilt of experiences then colliding around one act, a kind of togetherness that becomes literally what they're doing. And they kind of meld everything else that they're doing into this happening. I think when it's lost, one has access to it. But while one is in it, the literalization becomes the actuality. Hmm? But as a matter of fact, you will still see in retrospect that it was all theater. Whether it actualized at a certain point or not. Then you also see in the movie that you would be watching of it that it actualizes for the people in the movie, but not for the audience. So the fear that the actor would have in the movie is seen from a larger space by the audience, and you see that the experience that they're having in a moment is part of a picture that is happening, an unfolding that is taking place, and that the life was always an unfolding. And the perception of it unfolding then turns it into more of a journey than a literalness, where experiences shift. So I would say what you're having now is experiencing going into the literal world and adopting and adapting and moving it, but still without. So when you may run into something, it's where you can't compromise something for yourself. But they get a smack on the head for that moment also, or maybe a smack in the face, or maybe a raise and a reward
We'll see.
for bringing something new to the place. Mhm. So I would say that you are bringing something new to the place, that you're kind of asking for the literal world to be more humane to the people, because the workers or whatever become forgotten dudes or whatever in a larger picture. And so there is something inherently in the larger picture that dehumanizes the thing, but makes a big, let's say, for me to have a couple of billion in a golf course of my own outside the house or whatever, while I'm teaching love out there, is to so distance myself from the world that's happening, that the things I'm coming out is removed from the actuality, it's theorized. So let's say that the empathy grows, not lessens. And if that comes your way, it comes your way as a way of being spread or shifted or whatever it's done. Let's say you are navigating the world in your way. You're learning how to adapt. you can, let me see, look here, do average citizen. Let me see how an average citizen would look. What kind of job is it? Is an average citizen kind of job?
Sure. Yeah.
Let's see, act like a natural citizen for a moment there.
I should probably wipe this grin off my face.
No, he's doing okay, isn't he? Right? Does
Yeah.
he looks like a good citizen, doesn't he? And a good guy. Although we don't want to check your portfolio or not, but basically, you look like you can be trusted. Let me see the face. Yeah, he looks like a person you can trust. Is that true?
Just not to be on time. Just that's the only thing I just can't seem to do.
But not purposeful.
No.
You're still saying it's accidental. You're not being snotty about it.
No, I don't think so.
Showing off about it. But you can't explain it either. You say, I can't be there on time. They say, why? They say, my father beat me when I was a child. And that meant I could never be on time anywhere after that. I say, okay, we get it then. So is there a reason you can't be on time?
I try to fill time. I always want to do just a little more and then things always take longer than I think they're going to take. Always, it seems. It's very silly, but so I should budget more time. I mean, it seems like I should be able to figure it out, but
well, figuring it out is that you're saying that you're not a slave to a circumstance, that you have a life and you're doing things, and that's part of it. But at the same time, you also understand that they have a literal situation there that they're organizing. So I think you're making that adjustment in it. But if they want an over believer in their work, you probably will have some accident happen. Meaning. Yeah. So generally, they seem like they're hiring me because you're you.
yeah, more and more so. It
And they want the qualities that you bring. And so they must so did you say to them, sometimes I'll be in late, I'll make it up some other way or something like that? You can deduct something.
Maybe I should just offer that up front. I haven't gotten to that point. They figure it out pretty quick. And I'm not ridiculously late, but it seems like, if there's a little bit of flexibility up front, that's really, really helpful to me.
So let's say, good luck with it. Let's say that basically you're figuring out a way to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
And you're keeping the human going. It's still having a dialogue with a mystery, it seems, and even the job may be a conversation with the mystery.
Sure, absolutely.
And so you may be bringing a creative element to the job because someone in that job may admire your creativity. So let's say it looks hidden because no one's taking the pictures of our larger life. So the things that are in the larger life waiting look hidden to us. So we may try to literalize it to the future, and that's what we try to do with a literal job, a literal education, to have this or to have that, to literalize the situation, but still from the larger picture. Just like we're having a rainstorm now, and we've been having floods and this and that throughout the place after the fires. Is it coming here? Is it passing over? Is it going there? The difference between 10 feet of something happening is a flood or not a flood. But you also see the fluidity of the thing, the elements of flux that you're in. So let's say that there are many hidden movements happening in you. And it's not such a flaw that you can't literalize it in certain times, because the literalization is somehow you can, let's say you can run on stage and play Hitler, but you can't be Hitler.
Okay.
And the deeper you can play Hitler is the deeper because you can't be Hitler, so once you have the human aspect of it, you can bring to the role another dimension. So they hire you then to be a Hitler, and they say, no, I don't want the job. Okay. So let's say that somehow your ability to navigate creatively in these spaces,
Mhm.
when in fact it's more of a creative life for you. And creative life means that you've assumed many identities so far in the stages that you've had.
Mhm.
You've gone from son and this and lover and friend and any role that you wish to have, and you've
Dunce.
assumed them. And you've had enough fights to actualize the roles that you've assumed. You took them seriously. So let's say now we share something where there's fluidity in the situation, and you kind of also see not only the experiences that you've had, but you see the theater of the experiences that you've had. And the theater is a deepening of the experiences, not a softening of the pain or whatever. It deepens the perspective. And so when I was interested in one of Yoko Ono's paintings was called Step On, where she would put the painting or the painted work on the floor and step on. Hmm? But then there was an older story that said in Japan in the 17th century when Christian missionaries came, and they converted some of the population. They couldn't tell who became Christian. They would make them step on pictures of Jesus or Mary, and they couldn't.
Jeez.
And they would, those who couldn't do it, they knew were converted Christian. So the step on meant
Wow.
pretty heavy painting. The step on meant that you crushed the culture, you destroyed them. You know, so the stepping on it, and then you saw that. I remember when they were trying to find out these Jews that were that tried to convert, and they were hiding. You know, so they would make them stand on a pigskin because they couldn't eat pigs secretly. So if you made them eat pigs, they would start. You know, if you made them do something. Like stepping on the picture of Jesus or Mary, especially Mary in those countries. Mary was like the mother of it all. But that was a way of finding out the step on. So then I had known that something like that, but then I found it again in the reading about Yoko Ono's situation where how brilliant she was before Lenin also, and had that whole, and yet people would take a long time before they found out what step they thought it was this or that, but then it became very deep. The stepping on phenomena was the cancel culture. And the non-existence, that somehow you would find a way to see what people believed, and then you would eliminate. So it's a very interesting circumstance, but just the very premise of making them expose themselves in a way that their inner world would be revealed. And so I saw a real depth in her work in that way. The step out, even though it looked superficial at the happening, but then people then who got it started to do step on work themselves, and stuff like that. So then can one see, without over glamorizing it, Will, can one also see the journey at the same time you see the literal?
I feel that at times that's an element of it. I guess it's always an element.
I'm saying for us, the literal is also magical because we're assuming an identity then. So somehow it's no longer, okay, you are assuming now a new role. So what was naturally there now is not so naturally there. You are consciously assuming a role, changing your schedule, figuring this out brilliantly. But something else is added to it, a kind of shining on the situation. And I say there are other factors that are happening in you that are also assuming this job with you.
Mm-hmm.
You want to say hello to them?
To the other factors?
Let's say, hey, factor, you're looking for a lover? Yeah, there's something. Okay. Not literally, but naturally. So can that ever be naturally? That naturally there is a conversation with you happening with the mystery that is not a literal conversation, but may happen literally. An accidental happening takes place and reveals the conversation that you have. So let's say while Will is having a job, and it's not only literally around survival, there's quite a few creative elements that are also happening with the situation. And that is that you've entered into a medium. And you understand, you're assuming a role in a medium, an interactive medium, is it?
Yeah.
And you have a role.
Yeah.
And people speak to your role and you speak to their role. Where do I find
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
where do I find this? And you go down aisle 4 and you make a left turn over there, and the mattresses are on the right.
Yeah. Step into the whole thing.
I'm imagining all this because I went to Sam's Club yesterday and I was asking those questions. Okay. So I'm imagining the situation. But even when I'm asking the guy, they start cracking up laughing, and I'm cracking up laughing about it also. Like, what the hell are we doing here? Okay. So there is a kind of weird lingo that happens as I'm walking around, and these guys are also working there or hanging around there. And they say, how you doing? And I say, knock on wood. And that's the kind of language that is happening with people that have, it is not literal language. It is waving at each other. It is saying hello. It is kidding around. It is everybody doing their thing or whatever. But it's a milieu. And for me, you assume an identity that's comes second nature to you now in the milieu, and you navigate the aisles, and all of it becomes readable. And the people even have a friendly, naturally, in that circumstance, where they may not outside of it. They may wave or say hello or get out of each other's way, but somehow there's a cooperation happening. And it's normal. But it's also remarkable simultaneously that somehow everyone accepts a certain circumstance of navigation. Now, you may get what you call crazies who are bringing attitude into the circumstance, but what you are getting is a milieu. I find the so-called natural to be pretty remarkable. And even the weirdness, so-called weirdness of walking through it has almost an artwork feeling to it.
Yeah.
So as we were mentioning before, it's my concerns is always the literalization of the treatment then becomes treatment. When treatment in the past was an aspect of what was happening, but then treatment became the actuality.
Sure.
So we try to explain literally what is happening with the person when the person was happening on many levels. So what looked like evasion on one level may have also been a dynamic somewhere else.
Forget that you're on stage and it becomes like automatic and it's like running itself.
The difference is when you are acting out to survive, it is driven. When you assume the roles of a circumstance, that becomes a creative life from a perspective where, and I say, what would assume a role mean? You see someone is hurt and you stop what you're doing and you assume a role and maybe help them or something. So you see it's happening all the time. And you also see to some degree that when you assume a role, there is a responsibility with the role. And that means the meaning of the word responsibility is not only literal as citizens in law, but responsibility is to be there for the role that you've assumed. Rispondere, the Latin word for it, is to be there. So to be there so in creativity and acting, to be there means to be there from a heartfelt, not so much psychologically. Too complex? Look, let me see, put your nose back a moment so I can see. Look at his nose, Kai. Can you see the heart in his nose? So can you
What's
see why-
happening?
can you see why he really has this job here? Okay. So can you see that anyone who knows hearts will be able to, they'll bump into your nose accidentally? So let's say it does seem, since I've known you, your main feature in life has been a deep search for a love of your life.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes it may not need to be the love of your life, but just someone waving at you every now and then, just to break up what you would consider the lonely thread that runs through it.
Uh-huh.
Hmm?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But let's say there is also something in you that's not exactly nuts, that somehow has to have some genuineness to it.
Uh-huh.
Hmm?
Yes.
So that would be a dilemma in today's world, wouldn't it? That it have some genuineness in the world. Okay. So then you see the dilemmas that would come your way when if it would get too cheesy or too lean this way or that way, or if its main purpose was to relieve your loneliness. And once that was done, okay. So then you see that it's a remarkable thing on many levels. It is not just a search. Some of it, it looks like it has to come accidentally, but it has to come somehow without the ego owning the story. So to the ego, that looks like accident. But what the accident meant was the motive wasn't so strong. So the motive in the world that we're in is to continue at all costs. But the motive of the love is to touch something genuine before that takes over. So I feel that without, I'm sorry if I'm giving it too much schmaltz, but would you like the job of being Will?
Yeah, it's okay.
And Will's got a journey, and the journey is not specified. But you live your everyday life, and part of that is a journey that you opened up a few years ago in trying to explore things.
Man.
So now part of the life is exploratory, not literal.
Yeah.
But the quest that you had at that time with all those characters had a depth of truth, even though the story runs away with itself. There was a true thing running through the story. That there was a yearning running through that story. Everybody had their own characteristics about it. You know, everyone took the feeling and made their own story around it. But you saw when I met each folks from that story, there was a yearning that ran through the story that gave it a genuineness. The stories were kind of weird, but there was a genuineness of yearning that ran through the story. And I felt that that yearning could not be satisfied with a false psychological thing very long anyway, or it could be satisfied. That satisfaction was not its same, but depth was its same. And after having experienced where you've come from, there is a quest for something genuine and true love, not just accommodating each other's psychological need. Because that doesn't work out that well anyway, as it literalizes, isn't it? So let's say there is a genuineness running through the story for you. At the same time, there's a parallel surviving. And like, let's say you then have a perspective that comes pretty close to being a writer, where you see elements in your everyday life or elements in the story that you're writing. But the story that you're writing has a kind of purity to it that your everyday life, you can do this and you can do that to accommodate. But that in your story life, there's a purity. So you didn't have an escapist element in the creative life. And when you didn't have that in the creative life, then the escapist element in the literal life was no longer avoidance in the same way it was creative. You understand that in all your relationships that you have ever had, there's an argument and an honest conversation coexisting.
Oh,
You see, there was an honest conversation for a moment, and then an argument became the dominant force. And you see the two elements happening in the story. It takes the form of argument, and And it takes the form of a naive affection that just allows something to happen. And then there is a moment where that naive affection is an intrusion. So you see that there is a dialogue with a genuineness in one's life throughout the life. And when it starts to leave it, then it starts to kind of, well, I guess that the world of show business becomes the dominant factor. So business to me is the factor that's challenging, where the business comes from, because then it does seem to be that once it's on the level like we were just talking about earlier, we're talking about corporations, billion-dollar industries dictating this and that, talking that they co-opted our lives and somehow are talking natural. And when they're talking natural, they ain't natural. Now somehow they're part of this conglomerate of, okay, and natural would be how I feel if we're just hanging around and, okay. Then we would have the conversation that we're having right now. Then there's a re-entering the story, I think, from a different place. But the story is strong. And the make-a-buck story of fame and literalization is also, but it also does, once it literalizes as a business, it starts to lose certain factors. Is what I mean to say. Okay. Are you okay, Will? Thanks for being
Great.
our poster child for the moment.
Thank you.
Okay, good luck on the job. And I'll speak to you soon. Take care.
Take care.
Derek, you're okay?
All is well. Thanks, Danny.
Yeah. Now, everyone's Bitcoin is gone. Is it, Kai? How bad has it been?
We don't do Bitcoin, we do stocks. So
Stocks have taken a hit too, for sure. The
Well,
whole
everything is taking a hit.
Tico's making money though. Tico's still making money.
Okay.
He's learning how to
Natural.
play the stock market.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
Oh boy.
Is he okay with it?
He loves it, but as long as he loves it, I'm good. I just want him to love what he's doing.
Okay. So the Bitcoin they're out of now? Or
We
not?
never bought in.
No, and never bought into it. Well, it seems to be. And how are you doing with it, Derek? You're managing still? You didn't have that much going.
No, and I just am hanging on to it as property. The traders are trading. Sure, they're still trading it because it still fluctuates, by thousands, and so you can still leverage yourself into millions or hundreds of thousands. But that's not so interesting to me, I guess.
It's 20.8 now.
Yeah.
Wasn't it down to like 6? Wasn't it down
No.
really?
No, it got down to 18.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it fluctuates between thousands.
20.8, so it should be 21. So it's playing around that level like that. So let's say if I had anything in it, I've lost 3/4 of it.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's lost. I mean, if it's like having a rock and the value of the rock dropped.
No,
but the
I'm
rock,
not saying anything. I'm just saying the logical thing, what you had enormously invested in the beginning and how it's flowing. So then you lost that amount of money. So it may come back, it may not come back, but as it is now. So we put enough of money in it that it was not big investment, just small to see how it was going. I wanted to find out some other things to see if I had a parallel world of, where, as I said before, I asked the question, then how could the painting become part of the crypto world? And they just showed you how it was, but then they also showed you how they're angling that and all the hustles that are going on in that. And so then you started to see to some degree that the hustles were running away with it now, that there may have been an original hipness to it, where you wanted a medium that wasn't so organized in the world, which was happening with most of us. I was trading for art, and we were trading this and that. I even traded a car for a painting and this and that. It's normal stuff like that. And then we literalized not. But the one thing is, I would say, don't avoid taxes or don't break the law in any way. But basically, the trading was the medium that you saw when you visited that world and you stumbled upon it. Buying and selling didn't mean only buying and selling. It meant when you had friendships in the situation. Then you were trading information, you were trading stuff like that. I'll look out for your kids for something. And so it was a world like that that you stumbled into. And it was also naturalized. So, but my feeling also, there was crypto in that already. Not because it was hidden, but it was the everyday transactions that people had and shared with each other. When you had friends who were artists and they needed something and you needed something, they traded pay. So there was a world that had a kind of honesty to it. And prices were relative. You kind of estimated values of something like that, but it wasn't literalized. I feel a large part of the world is doing that. And that we presume that the literal money world is what is happening. But I feel that a lot of transactions are happening that are not related to the literal. I feel it was crypto always happening, and somehow it was revealed to some that it was happening, and in that they expanded upon it. But as it literalized, again, it becomes corrupted, as do the stocks. But as you read the stocks, you can see a bit what's happening and flow with them. But again, there is an up and downness to it all. But so I would say the interest in that world is a way of getting out of the literal world. You know what I mean? And somehow having, to me, the boy is picking up hidden languages in music. And, you know, that you find out that if you walk in Hall Street, if you walk in that building, you won't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Whole other world in there, you know, and they're screaming and shouting at each other, and they're making, and there's literally something happening around the world with what they do. That was then. Now it's happening as a norm. So when you see certain elements that run through the story, it's like learning a language. If you learn the language of something, then it kind of gives you entree into what is happening in another way.
Mm.
The only question is, the people who are running a show to some degree have a lingo that no one else knows that they share with each other. The thing that happens with that is that there's a loss of the connection to the larger picture of people. That you're managing millions of people's lives. And in managing millions of people's lives, it's not only the literal, there is a sense of it. And it happened early on. The sense of it is somehow a relationship with God, or a relationship with a feeling, or a relationship with, and it's not so literalized, but intuitive. And you see that your relationship to the population you're caring for is like a child you're caring for. We're not seeing much of that feeling in running into those people who are supposedly the B air guys. Are not exhibiting yet that kind of aesthetic. That somehow their life is shifted from a literal survival into a life that is a creative one that they're sharing. So the monetization of the expression is challenged. If it comes to you as a byproduct of what you're doing is what you'd like, that people love the movie you've made and they come in to see it. You'd like the life to not be so literalized as a job. Is that possible, Kai?
Sure.
So you see that act, the balancing act that goes on, and it's built that way. You run into different systems that are controlling.
It just feels like if you approach it from a space of love, then you're going to be in a whole different system.
Well, then let's see. So then you bring that to the circumstance where coming from you, then it's a deeper human feeling to know these fields. It's like then knowing the music on another level. And then you see it's not only around literal music or entertainment, but you see that there is a searching in the music. to connect, and sometimes even in the singing, there is a conversation in the singing that's real to you. You see, the singers that touch you deeply are having a conversation, with an energy or a feeling or a circumstance. So you visit the energy creatively for a moment, where the story somewhat shifts for you. I feel your presence is bringing that dynamic. And is it worth hanging around for? Okay. Well, maybe
As long as I'm here. If
Yeah.
I'm not here, no. If I'm here, yes.
Okay. So let's say a spaceship will come for you one day. Okay.
Krishna's spaceship.
Krishna's spaceship will come to you one
Yeah.
day. Or some form like that. The spaceship will come. Everyone will recognize it. No one will argue with it. It'll just be natural. I think that somehow you've created it where it has to be natural. No violence, no trip, nothing like that. Just, is that too dumb? I think you're doing natural. And explore natural, just like I'm talking about remorse, not so much as an ownership of the ego, but remorse then is a feeling one has. And as you explore it, it kind of opens up a world seen from a different place. And I feel that once that is done, it kind of somehow releases the literalness of the story. Because everyone could have just been cool. And said, sure, okay, well, why not here? Okay, right. Okay, so no, let's say one has an experience to go through. And it is what it is to feel like being a human in a situation where we assume the role. But I do feel that the idea that an angel enters into the body where the history is no longer the force, but the experience is there, I feel that somehow I had that sense from you. Because I didn't have that before I had conversations with you, assumingly, where I saw that the premise was an angel entering into the story to have the experience that a regular person would avoid because it would be a broken heart. And it seems that somehow the broken heart is not a flaw or a psychological condition, but a conversation somehow with the mystery, or with a deep sense, or with an absent love. We'll call the mystery a conversation where it's not in the form, not in the body, but there's a conversation in absence. I feel you have the literal circumstance you're in, but there is an effect each person will carry out of the circumstance in their life. And at the same time, it's everyday stuff. But at the same time, I think it's existing on a lot of levels.
Yeah, I'm finding the deep beauty in everyday stuff. Just walking down the street. The beauty in walking down the street.
I went on
Buying a car.
You bought a car. That should be interesting. And you bought it directly from a dealership or online like that?
Dealership. We prefer to go to friends because then they'll take care of it if something happens.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying, creating a friendly in the circumstance. We'll see if we do anything. I don't know. Our car is still okay, but I'm not driving it all anymore in the last, even though I just got a new license. The times that I did go out, Spiro sometimes drives me to get the bread tomorrow and see this guy, Willem, who may be coming over soon. And also I told you about Joffrey Reggio. We were invited to.
Yes, how was that?
Well, we didn't go to the film yet. Now they want to put it off until Saturday. So I told him, I watched a lot of his films recently. Did you see any? Did you see any, Urja?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Well, it's a new one. So we've put it off until Saturday. We may go Saturday or not. But then I've invited Willem to come over to the house. So we'll see what we're getting involved in there. and that movie world. But there were a few people who were also there, I think, at the house that were directing and music makers and so on. Hey, Seth. Okay, should we call it a day? And I hope to see some of you tomorrow and with Derek tomorrow night and maybe Sunday. Namaste.
Thank you.
Okay.
Namaste.
Thank
Bye,
you, Kat.
everybody.
Was anyone else on? Connie?
Yes, we had, I don't know who's on now, but we've had quite a few people today. Let's see, we've had Sophia, Jimmy, well, Will's here, Israel, Michael Bravo. I don't, Blue and Light, I don't know who that is. I mean, I know they
No.
comment a lot, but I don't know who. Yeah, that's who.
Okay, today was more conversational, but at the same time, it was around the energy and the mystery in the everyday. And I'll see you soon.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Kat.
Thank you.